Woodman. I am Jamie Cannibal, and this is yeah. Now we're doing Gnomes. We're doing part 2 of Diggers. Yeah. Crackheads, most likely. They spent all day walking around the quarry, looking in the barn, and pointing at spaces. They looked like they were going to be here a long time. They had even powered a truck that was a crane up and moved it into position that would be able to pick up material from the road. And then 2 other trucks came with more people. The Gnomes had been keeping quiet, unseen, but the alchemist and his force of young cadets decided to sabotage the first truck because it was on the edge of the hill. Him and 5 other youngers had boarded to take the battery out. While he was overseeing them do it, Cinco pressed the handbrake off, and just as they passed the battery down, the truck started to move. The alchemist and Cinco, Lovebottom and Pesto Rankle and Tony Badgeroon all froze with horror as the truck gathered pace and rolled down the hill into the junction of moving traffic. It then missed all the incoming traffic and stopped on the railway just as the 3:40 p.m. Freightliner was due. The alchemist got to the edge and lowered Pesto and Cinco down. Tony was still messing with the radio. The alchemist turned and looked at him. "Come on, boy, quickly before you get caught." He lowered Tony. Suddenly there was a screaming noise coming from everywhere. The alchemist looked down and jumped. Grimmer was in the barn making sure everyone stayed away from the humans. They were making loud noises, and then one of the alchemist's young'uns turned up with a really worried face. He, as soon as he got to Grimmer, said, "I'm so sorry, but it wasn't our fault. We just wanted to immobilise the truck. We didn't think that it would make more, or well, we watched it and it went down the road to the junction and then it crossed the 2 lanes of traffic without an incident and it came to a stop on the tracks just as the barriers were coming down, and we watched, and I know they would survive, they're smart Gnomes, but a freight train came so fast they would have been close. It would have been a close shave, but if we sent a rescue party, it started to snow. We thought all of your people should decide, you should decide on what to do." Grimmer turned to Granny, who had prior experience at finding lost gnomes in the dark of winter. She asked if they could mount a rescue. She offered to man it and leave Cinco's father, Mr. Lovebottom, in charge of the gnomes while she was gone. Granny and Mr. Badgeroon and herself picked up spears and headed into the wilderness as the snow fell hard. They kept on the road, and by the time they got to the junction there was so much traffic, a flashing light, vehicles and people with cameras filming other humans and explaining the accident and the disruption it had made. Grimmer thought that they wouldn't be in the middle of it all. They would have been some hole or a fox den or something. Granny pointed at how the snow was falling on one side of the road and said, "If I was them, I would be on the dry side of that snow." "You're right, let's go to the field on the other side of this hedge," I believe Grimmer said. I believe Grimmer said. As they looked, all of a sudden a fox appeared. Grimmer froze. She had always had masculine to deal with foxes. Just as she decided to raise her spear, Granny Cannibaloid jumped at the fox's head and grabbed an ear and a whisker, stabbed the fox in the eye with her walking stick, and the fox screeched and ran for it. "Don't you tell me that wasn't fun," Granny said. They found a rabbit hole. "It's okay, we're going to be okay," Cinco was saying. "He's broken a leg, but we can move him." Grimmer found a piece of metal that was gnome leg sized. She pulled out her spring that she always has a stash of around her waist and proceeded to tie his splint. The alchemist seemed relieved. They then took him home to which was Drafty Barn. When they got back, the first thing the alchemist said was, "Is there any food?" Grimmer was informed that the humans had ripped out all their farming and food supplies, and the only thing that they had was the chicken farm. But they suffered the same risk of detection. They were desperate now, so they chose 2 medium chickens and started a small fire in the back warehouse to cook them. The humans hadn't left fully. There was one of them they had left behind on his own, and the others had disappeared when the truck had drifted down the hill. The other who was there was staying in the office. He'd looked out of the window on and off all night. The alchemist turned to Grimmer and said, "What we need to do is get the gnomes to the big warehouse on the last field. It's far enough away to be safe. I know you don't want to leave, but we must protect our young. There would be some supplies we would be able to use there." Grimmer looked out of the barn. There was the chicken farmer going to the office. He had a gun and he wasn't happy. The man appeared at the door and raised his hands. There was a passing of word, and then the chicken farmer shot at the door to the office and walked away. The man didn't like being threatened. He was in the cold now because he couldn't shut the door. After 5 minutes and calling someone on his phone, he went back to the truck and left. And the gnomes had the office back. It was 3 days before they came again, and Grimmer had gone to her and Maslin's hole on the roof of the office and left a note on the bed saying, "Gone to the big silos and tractor warehouse. I will stay there for as long as possible. I love you, Grimmer." She then met all the gnomes in the JCB barn, and all the gnomes were ready. The plan was to fight to scare the humans and leave them all alone. As 2 trucks pulled into the quarry, the gnomes drove out in the JCB. The trucks stopped and work out what was happening and tried to drive away, but the JCB had already blocked their path. The men jumped out of the truck just as the JCB slammed into the cockpit of the other truck, reversed into the road, and then the JCB followed it and rammed the truck, popping both the front wheels. The men inside were terrified, and the JCB rolled round, headed for the moors. After following an icy road, it stopped at a gate, and a couple of gnomes jumped off to open the gate. Then a car with flashing lights appeared on the road and moved the JCB through and then closed the gate. The car pulled up to the field and a man got out and shouted. He tried to climb the gate. And then the JCB continued across the fields. They finally got to the tractor warehouse where the bale silos were, and just as they were about to get shelter for the night, this had taken them all day to get there. A light shone from the sky and slowly got bigger. It was following the tracks in the snow, and from the tail end of destruction, Maslin landed behind the JCB, and Grimmer smiled. She had waited for him. He had come back. The ship took on the gnomes. And now for the story of Maslin, Budman and Angelo. Still no smoking weed. Oh well, I'm sure these gnomes will one day. Budman.